Welcome to Rich Conversations. Today we'll chat with Remington Tonar. Over the past 2 years, I've been on this, I would say, learning journey, and it's been invigorating and inspiring. And I wanted to talk to Rem about what does the future of learning look like? I'm really interested in that. And so we had a really excellent discussion, and I'm excited to share this with you. You can follow Remington at Remington Tonar. Let's begin. All right. So, Rem, the reason why I want you on today is I've been thinking about the future of learning and formal education because over the last 2 years, I've just been following my curiosity and I've seen this personal growth within myself that's just on this like steep incline. And I'm wondering too about with the coronavirus pandemic affecting the globe and schools having to adjust and do learning online, and it's disrupting a lot of educational models. What does it look like moving forward in the 21st century?
Yeah, well, this is a great topic, and a lot of people are talking about it. And Rich, as you know, I've spent a lot of time in various schools and universities.
Yeah.
Probably more than most. And I have in my past life as a consultant worked with a number of top tier universities and colleges, as well as testing organizations and other companies and nonprofits that are in the education sector. So I've thought about these topics a lot. And what I'd say is, first of all, the changes that are happening in education now are not new. They've been happening. COVID has just accelerated them, right? Like MOOCs have been around now for years, massively online open courses, right? And online learning has been increasing in popularity for many years. And even before COVID, a lot of colleges and schools were putting entire curricula online. University of Illinois, for example, put its entire MBA curriculum online for free, and many others have been offering online executive and continuing education courses. So the digitalization or the digitization of higher education in particular has been a trend that has been underway in transforming and challenging traditional models of education for some time, and the origin of that is really like everything, the disruption caused by technology, in this case, the ability of the internet to make knowledge and content and information accessible globally for free or for cheap. And in the world we live in today, knowledge and content is really a commodity, right? Yes, content is king, but it's also commoditized. There's a lot of content out there, and you can get educational content on Wikipedia and other types of courses. There's all these like online courses now, and people who have gone through like say any program or a course of education that isn't licensed, right? So you can't get online and teach a medical school program because it's regulated, right? And accounting, it's to some degree accounting and law certainly, but for unregulated areas or subject matters, all that content is readily available. The one that is being disrupted that is top of mind today is the MBA, the Masters of Business Administration. That is unregulated. There's no licenses or certification required to practice business, and that knowledge is now more commoditized. So you see all these articles about how the starting salary for MBAs is declining, just as it did for lawyers, right? Lawyers used to be, and before that, accountants, right? So the global economy goes through these cycles where the skills necessary to succeed change. And people who have those skills through their education are advantaged, but then everybody else runs to get a JD or get an MBA. But at that point, it's a commodity. And as more people obtain that degree, the less valuable it becomes. Supply and demand.
Supply and demand, yeah.
Supply and demand. So that's what's happening with a lot of these degrees. Other degrees, such as theology, for example, just aren't very practical. You can't really use those degrees. So they're not, even if they're only in moderate supply, they're also in extremely low demand. So overall, all of these trends have been impacting education broadly speaking, for some time. And now with COVID, it's forced laggard universities to try and catch up. So universities that have been behind the trend are now being forced to say, oh, we got to get online. We got to do all this stuff. I think what's going to be really challenging, though, for some of these universities is, okay, when all the content is online,
Hmm.
and a top tier university can now open its curriculum or its certain programs up to a broader audience. How are the middle tier, the second tier universities, for example, going to compete? Because a lot of them compete on campus experience or high touch of their faculty or a
Yeah.
really robust career center. Well, those are the things that you can't really take as good advantage of if you're remote, right?
Right.
So why wouldn't you want Harvard on your degree if it's remote versus some school down the street? Well, you're going to choose Harvard, right? So I'm concerned about the viability. Well, maybe not concerned. Maybe it's a good thing, but the viability of the second tier universities is going to be interesting to see because I think a lot of them will end up suffering because of this because they haven't been able to adapt. So they're not ahead of the trend, and they don't have as much to offer in a purely content commoditized world.
What about the idea of like industrial, what do you call that? Like complexes where they're just trying to like build more buildings to attract and recruit students for tuition. So the tuition is super high. And if now we're remote learning and you can go learn from Harvard rather than the school down the street, like how can you charge that tuition and this like industrial complex with all these universities trying to compete against each other? And it's like, wait a minute, isn't
Yeah, it's
the
like
point of higher education supposed to be like learning rather than like all these other accessory things?
well, there is a campus industrial complex, right?
Yeah,
Where it's like you have to have the coolest campus. Your rec center, number one, is the rec center. Your rec center has to be these days has to be out of this world. You have to have pools and rock climbing walls and those where you the skydiving tunnels, where you
they
can
have
go into the tunnel.
skydiving tunnels
Yeah,
in them.
so it's like this is the level of competitiveness some of these schools are getting to now. And then of course, your library has to be top notch, and your classrooms have to have all the technology and gadgets and gizmos, and so yes, I mean, and now like being able to like book a study room on your phone and then like scan in, that's standard now. So these campuses are definitely getting more sophisticated, and people are spending more on them because look, it's kind of the theme park. It's like a theme park play, right? You want the experience to be immersive and
Yeah,
for people to feel like they're in a different world. And this is like the idea of kind of ivy hedgerows and the ivory tower. The nature of academia has always been or has always kind of tended to shut itself off from the outside world, to close itself off, to
yeah,
try and isolate itself. And so, if you're one of these universities that thinks very highly of itself, which most do, the best thing for you is to kind of bring your students in and then like keep them in a bubble, right? Because then they're in your
right.
bubble. And
Yeah,
that's how you control the educational experience. That's why I've personally, Rich, as you know, I've always liked universities and attended universities that are woven into the fiber of their cities, right?
yeah. Why
Uh,
don't you elaborate on your educational background?
so my undergraduate degree is from Marquette University, which is a Catholic Jesuit private institution in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that is kind of just in the middle of the city. You walk down the street and it's
Yeah,
mostly buildings belonging to the university, but there's also buildings around that don't belong to the university, and office buildings and apartment buildings and homeless people and the whole bit. And then I have a master's degree from Loyola University Chicago, which is in Chicago. They do have a little bit of a campus, but it bleeds very quickly into the surrounding neighborhood, which is not an upper income neighborhood, to put it mildly. And then they have a downtown campus, which is right in the heart of downtown Chicago on Michigan Avenue. And then I have another master's degree from New York University. And for those of you who know NYU, the greatest school on earth, it is very much part of in and of the city. It's its buildings are scattered around the city. Most of them are in Washington Square Park, but there's tourists walking through and other stores and shops and offices, and it's hard to call what NYU has a campus there in New York. And then also I'm ABD, or all but dissertation. And hopefully I'll get my PhD dissertation done at some point at the University of Aberdeen, which does have a campus, a very gorgeous campus in Scotland, very old, very historic, fantastic library, very modern. And they've been able to, but see, that's a little different because most of what they have, most of the magic on campus at Aberdeen wasn't built recently. It's ancient, right? It's very old,
yeah.
and it has a Harry Potter type of feel to it, which is obviously a characteristic of many English but European universities. But yeah, and then as clients, I've worked with NYU, MIT, Oklahoma State, a bunch of other schools, big and small, around the globe, and some of the testing organizations as well. People don't realize that college testing is a big industry, and most of the ETS and College Board, which are the two main ones that own the ACT and SAT, are nonprofits, but they make billions of dollars a year on testing. And tests historically, of course, have pretty much determined what schools you get to go to. So if you're, the nonprofits like those folks have tremendous power. They have tremendous power to determine who goes where. And there's been many studies and criticisms levied against them that they're just, the nature of their questions are somewhat biased. And actually do have like regressive effects. It's like if you grew up in a certain type of community, there are certain things that might not make sense to you and how the question is phrased and stuff like that. Like it's not equitable, certainly. And it's big money. And it has a disproportionate impact on who gets to go where, which is why I'm very happy that many schools now, including the Ivy Leagues, are abandoning standardized tests for college admission. That's been a long time coming, and
I hated the standardized test.
Nobody likes standardized.
Oh my gosh!
I'm going to say something, it's going to offend people, but I'm going to say it anyway, and it could be offensive to many friends of mine. I know a lot of people who are very successful and have gone through Harvard and Yale and schools of that caliber, Princeton, etc. But and they're all great test takers. But a lot of them end up in big corporate jobs, very predictable, rather boring, pay well, very respectable, but not the type of companies that I think a lot of people who hate standardized tests because of what they represent. I think those folks are more likely to be more creative, more out of the box thinkers, rule breakers, divergents, people who don't want to be confined to, or don't want to be judged based on like a couple hour test, but want to be judged as a holistic individual, not just, based on multiple choice questions. Right.
Yeah. I've been kind of taking this different educational approach than what I have in the past, the last 2 years, where I just start reading one book a week and then accumulate. I think of it as ammo. Like each book is just ammo, and I just keep arming myself.
Well, Rich, you're
and
now
I just use it on life.
You're now an autodidact, right?
That's a large word. What is it?
Yeah, autodidact, which means self-taught.
Yeah. I've been using that.
Like someone who's autodidactic is someone who's kind of taught themselves a lot of things, and anyone who kind of just accumulates knowledge whether it's for the sake of accumulating knowledge or for the sake of like using it as ammunition, is certainly in that autodidact bucket. And the autodidacts are a little different than like armchair learners, right? The armchair learner is kind of a tourist,
I think I know a lot of smart people, but I'm baffled that they don't use their knowledge more than they do. It's almost like they just gather this knowledge just to use it, and then at times be the actually guy.
The actually guy. Yeah.
Now like know something about this or that's so random, and it's like spending all this effort to learn about all this stuff, but then never like applying it in a way that's
Well,
useful
people don't
to
think of
society.
knowledge. People don't think. I really believe knowledge is power. People don't think of knowledge as an asset. They think of it as something that they think of it in a utilitarian kind of way, where I've accumulated this knowledge and I'm just going to keep it in the warehouse, and then as it's called out, I will deploy it. Rather than, right, the approach you and I take is no. We're going to see what's in the warehouse. We're going to go and get it, and we're going to roll it out and deploy
Yeah.
it. We're going to make the market. We're not going to respond to the market. We're going to make the market. I'm going to force knowledge into the world, not
Right.
just wait for the world to call my knowledge out. That's the difference.
So then what I think is so valuable now, we're talking about having all this information online and all these sources to learn knowledge and educate yourself online, is one of the most important things having a great internet connection and access to all these tools then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who's going to the library and checking out books? It's like in the time it takes you to go to the library, I could have read like 50 articles online and, have accumulated most of the points you're going to remember from those books, right?
Yeah.
So having an great internet connection is really important. But this is also a danger for society and one of the causes of some of the inequalities we see. I mean, there are people out there who either cannot afford or do not have access to good internet, right? Good broadband. Rural communities, for example, there are tens of millions of Americans without any broadband, kind of high-speed internet access at all still today. They live in inner cities and they live in rural America. And that is unacceptable. At what point do we have to say, and there have been bills in Congress to this effect that internet is like water. It's a fundamental utility that needs to be provided. And now I don't think the government should be providing that utility, but I think it should be mandated that it be provided by somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the internet is, telephone's a utility. Well, no one uses that thing anymore, right? So your kind of landline. I mean, your cell phone. It's essentially the internet, right? So it's all the same thing. It's all radio frequency, but all the wireless is RF, and then in most of the until you get to the tier 1 telecom providers, which actually own big pipe, most of it now is just RF. But and with 5G coming, that's going to be a disruptor. But yeah, we need to do better making sure people have good internet access. But also on top of that, even if they have internet access, doesn't mean they're going to be able to use it. I know a lot of people who still can't find basic information on Google because they don't know how to search for things or how to modify their search to find what they're looking for, or people who can't identify fake information, fake news from the genuine article, right? So
I saw this tweet where it was like the wealth inequality will be between the people under the 20th century model and the people that have figured out how to use the internet.
Yeah. Well, can you imagine if you're not using the internet either to accumulate knowledge or make money, right, in some capacity or conduct business, you're just not going to make it. Imagine a plumber who isn't accessible online. If I can't find you online, right, like as a plumber, you're going to get no clients. None.
Right. Yeah, it's so tough. And at the beginning, teaching children and teaching individuals how to access this stuff too, and media literacy, it's so important moving forward.
Media literacy is very important, kind of being able to navigate the internet. But I mean, the other problem is that like the technology is moving so quickly. By the time the kids that are in school now and grade school now grow up, the technology is going to look very different, right? Very different. So
in education, I mean, I'm not in the educational sector, but you see everything technology evolving so quickly that by the time someone starts kindergarten and goes to college or whatever they choose to do, all that stuff they've been taught is out of date.
It's gone.
It's more so like skills.
We need to teach people how to learn. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's the most important thing. Right. This is the objective of philosophy. Ultimately, the love of, which literally means the love of wisdom. Like people need to learn how to learn. They need to understand how to gather information, use that information to their advantage, assimilate that information into their worldview, change their worldview when necessary, deploy that knowledge and those belief systems as is necessary, and do it again and again and again, and keep doing it their whole lives. Right. We need to teach people how to be mentally mentally, cognitively, intellectually flexible and adaptive and anti-fragile, and how to and teach people, really how they can use their cognitive capacities, whatever level they may be at, as an asset, rather than simply kind of going through the motions and volunteering information only when necessary, and using that knowledge only when necessary. They need to use it to take control of their destiny, to be agents in their own story, right? Rather than just be receivers of what other people, the world that other people are creating for them.
Do you feel there's a sentiment in America of older individuals, older Americans, that the world it's going so quickly and it's changing, and there's a fear that they're getting left behind? And
I don't think it's old. I mean, the baby boomers now don't care. They're on their way out. They're like, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's not gonna make a difference to them. First of all, I don't know if it's an age thing. I've seen younger people express that sentiment as well. But I do think that is acute has historically been acute in Generation X, because they kind of fell in the gap. They remember the .com boom. Maybe some of them got burned by the .com boom, but they weren't digitally native, so they don't have the same kind of natural mastery of some of these technologies that folks our age do. So I see that in Generation X a lot, and those are the people who are now kind of middle managers, just going through the motions. And there's a lot of those folks out there. But, the nice thing is they've done enough by now in their career where they now have an army of younger people to help them with that stuff.
Right.
At some point, the young people should just stop helping them, and we'll see what happens to them. They'll flame out real quick. Rich, how do I print this?
I was like,
yeah.
I had this reaction just now. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. It's like, right? It's like, how do I print this? You're like, Rich, I erased something. How do I get it back? It's like, oh, my computer won't turn on, type of thing.
Yeah. Even I feel like part of me too, it's like hard to keep up with. I guess that's more social media.
But you're already behind, right? I mean, the technologies that are going to transform tomorrow. I mean, like, people are like, I don't know, what's a technology that you hear about now? Like, name a cutting edge technology.
Like a 3D printing.
Okay, that's old. That's like old hat, right?
Okay, what replaced that?
Well, so 3D printing is old. I mean, there are 3D additive printed parts in in jet engines now. Like, there are a couple of commercial airplane models that have jets with 3D printed components to them, right? I mean, like, we're already using 3D printing commercially, so it's like, if you think that this is not
it's certainly not new then.
Yeah, forget about it. But now there's quantum computing, right? And most people haven't even heard of quantum computing. But if you haven't heard of quantum computing and you're worried about the future, you got to learn about it, because it's going to eat everything. Like, this is the thing.
Quantum computing.
Yeah, quantum computing.
So is that
the impact?
AI?
No. So this is it's when you put if you were to put AI and quantum computing together, that's when you'd get like Skynet, Terminator, Matrix type of stuff, hypothetically. But quantum computing, the impact quantum computing is going to have on society is going to be similar to what the internet did for society. It's going to be that extreme.
So what is it?
Quantum computing. So right now, conventional computing is transistor based, right? So you have these transistors that store electrons, that store electricity basically, and the storage of kind of electrons on a circuit board, for example, in these transistors are what allows us to kind of code information. And on your chipset in your phone or on your computer, there's just millions of these things, these gates in there that are storing electrons. And so that's, and it's silicon, silicon wafers, and this is how we kind of construct modern computers. And then we're able to use binary, right? Because so on a CD, most people don't even know how CDs work. Remember CDs? Like, we don't have those anymore. But the CD was actually extremely like archaic. It was just from day one it was barbaric, because all you were doing was like the laser. Remember the lasers, right? You remember you could burn a CD, you can burn a disc.
Oh yeah.
Right? Well, you know why they called it burning? Because you would burn the zeros and ones hole, no hole, hole, no hole, 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 no hole, no hole, hole, right? Like that's binary, 0 1 0 1 0 0 1 1. That's, and so it would just burn binary into the disk. Like, but ultimately, all these transistors are doing are storing electrons that represent data sets. In a quantum computer, quantum computers are taking advantage of quantum physics and quantum mechanics, right? And in quantum physics and quantum mechanics, you can have what's called a superposition, and a superposition is where something is not just could be not just a 0 or a 1, right? But a 0 and a 1 simultaneously, right? So you're exponentially increasing your computing power by being able to represent a whole new state and then leverage the uncertainty of what state that piece of data is in to extract additional power. And so this is like particles, right? And so you have a left spinning particle or a right spinning particle. Well, there's also a scenario where the particle is spinning both left and right simultaneously, right? And this is why quantum physics is so confusing, because you remember Schrodinger's cat, the thought experiment. Schrodinger's cat, you open the box, is the cat dead or alive? Well, in the Copenhagen interpretation, the cat is both dead and alive until observed, type of thing. So it's like there's all these strange features of quantum physics, like the uncertainty principle, but also entanglement, which Einstein called spooky action at a distance, and he was like, this can't be possible. That's what Einstein called it. He called it spooky action at a distance because it appears to violate the speed of light barrier, because you can transfer information faster than the speed of light through entanglement. But which is a misnomer, but anyway, well, that's maybe another episode. But so quantum computing takes advantage of these really funky realities in nature at the quantum level, and it allows us to perform computing functions that are far beyond anything we can even imagine today, right? So how like people like blockchain and Bitcoin, right? Yeah. So like blockchains are really secure because you can't really crack one part of the blockchain without breaking the whole chain. A quantum computer at some point, the technology behind, they can't do it today. They're very rudimentary today. But at some point, quantum computers will probably be able to just crack blockchains without batting an eye.
Really? What are some good books about quantum computing or resources to learn more about that?
Actually, Microsoft. So all the major computing companies are doing research in this. Microsoft, IBM. Have big quantum computing programs. All these folks are investing in quantum computing. Honeywell right now, Honeywell, they may make your thermostat, for example. They actually currently have certainly the country's, but possibly the world's most powerful quantum computer, Honeywell.
Really? Why is that? They're trying to link everything together or something?
Honeywell has long been a pretty diversified business. And they're just leaning into new areas of their business now with this computing thing. But Microsoft's partnered with them. They're smoking IBM. Google is way behind actually on the. Well, they'd argue they'd say they would debate that, but I think Google's actually, they were in front and now they're behind. They got content and lazy. But IBM has some good machines. Honeywell has this new machine that kicks ass apparently. But you should look up. So the quantum computers have to operate in extremely low temperatures. So the device itself sits in what's called a dilution refrigerator, which kind of just lowers the temperature down to like absolute zero or close to absolute zero. But these dilution refrigerators look really crazy. They're like they almost look like chandeliers. They look really cool.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, why does it need to go down so cold? Just so that it doesn't heat up? If
you get heat, you get it needs to be that low so you don't get any interference, because these quantum states are extremely delicate, right? They'll just you can get interference and the whole thing, your error rates increase and the whole thing collapses very quickly. So like the computing conditions are very, very delicate.
Oh my gosh, it does look like a ship.
Are you looking it up? Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Isn't that cool?
Whoa.
It looks like the future too. You know what I mean? It's like
it looks like
the future.
It looks like people that would write about the future in the 19th century, like the time machine. It looks like something that like in Victorian England they would like create.
Yes. But so right now there's a huge race in quantum computing because there's still no one right way to do it, right? Like Honeywell's using a trapped ion.
So what's an example of a visual example of what quantum computing can create?
Well, really, this is, don't quote me on these numbers because these are, I'd have to look it up. But for example, like a quantum computer in like an hour can solve a mathematical problem that it would take a conventional computer like 10,000 years to do.
So
Or,
for the average,
something like that, right? I mean, it's just like the
yeah.
crazy order of magnitude superior, you know?
Okay. So for the average person, you're talking about like the technology. Once quantum computing happens, the technology will explode even quicker.
Yes. Like
Okay.
exponential,
Which then affects
really,
everything
yeah,
else in life and
yeah,
society.
yes.
Wow.
And we don't even know what we would do with that kind of computing power because right now we're like things are pretty fast. But
Yeah.
imagine if like you could call up every piece of information like out there in a millisecond. I don't know what you would do with that kind of capability, but that's the kind of stuff, crazy stuff we're gonna be able to do. Like the things that seem fast today are gonna seem slow. Years from now with quantum computers, like just asininely slow. Like people thought 56K was fast,
Yeah.
They're like, wow, like when you went from 28K modems to 56K, people are like, this is fast, right? Now we think that's slow as heck, right? Like things will load, and like with AI, things will preload, right? It'll like everything you do will be preloaded. You think you're making the choice to go to this next page, but it's already there. You don't even have to like go and do it. It just boom, pages you.
Oh, yeah.
It's like so you start to get to a place where you can't even imagine what this is going to allow us to do on a practical basis.
So then, if we're looking at that as part of the future, getting back to the idea of the future of learning and formal education, how do individuals prepare themselves for this?
Right, and the
To
point of this,
take advantage of
right?
it,
I mean,
you
the
know?
point of this was to say that like the things that will make like kids today successful, most parents don't even know about. Right, most educators don't even know about. There's the vast majority of K through 12 educators out there have never heard of a quantum computer.
Well, this
So,
was my first day. I
well,
know about I've heard of quantum mechanics and stuff
right,
like
yeah,
that, but
yeah.
like,
So, but it's like, we need to start sensitizing people to technologies that are, and maybe quantum computers don't work out. And by the time these kids grow up, there is no quantum computer. But, unless we start sensitizing them to just the general science behind these things or the general features and functions, they will be ill-equipped when they grow up and if we actually have this stuff. Because it is a different way of thinking. And you can start learning stuff practically, like all IBM and Microsoft have quantum computing kind of languages that they've rolled out now, like Qiskit and Q Sharp is Microsoft's, Qiskit is IBM's, I think. But they have languages where you can go on and kind of like run quantum simulations artificially using their kind of programming languages. So you can actually become a quantum developer, right? Like you can go to
okay.
school now, and there are universities offering degrees in quantum development, right? You're not a software developer, you're a quantum developer.
Wow.
And but like it's mostly physics, you know what I mean? It's like yes, you got to know the code, but really it's physics. You have to know the physics. It's like math and physics, and but like that's I feel like most people today who are maybe in high school, for example, just aren't prepared for that kind of world. So
Wow.
like the point being,
So
education is misprepared. Education prepares people for what we know already.
right now,
We need to
yeah.
prepare people for what's going to happen in the future. And now that's harder, but it's way more valuable if you can even come close to doing it right.
Yeah. Wow.
Like, why are we teaching people outside of history, which is like history for history's sake? But like, why are we teaching people like concepts that like have been proven? We need to equip people to invent new concepts, right? And think about concepts that haven't been invented yet, and things that haven't been invented yet, or are going to be invented, or maybe they'll invent them. It's like everything is like, oh yeah, this is how it is today. This is how it's always going to be. Science is science. Well, that's bullshit. Right? I mean, like, science
We
said the
don't know
world
what
was
we don't
flat.
know.
So, yeah, we don't know what we don't know. We need to prepare people for the world they don't know, not the world we think we know. Right? Like the entire apparatus of education, how we teach kids anything is backwards. We need to teach forward, not backward. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But like let me tell you, K through 12 educators are not well compensated, and therefore we are not getting people who are even educators who are even equipped to do that, frankly. And that sounds horrible. I'm not bashing K through 12 educators; they are saints, but they're not the smartest, they're not towering intellectuals, right? That's why they're in K through 12 and not college, They have a different set of skills that are hugely valuable, right? I would like to take most K through 12 educators, confine them to certain subjects, and then bring in college professors. Why don't we have college professors teach select high school classes? It's like we just the problem is like,
there ever a mix or a
yeah,
integration or?
it's usually the other way around. Usually if you're a senior in high school or something, you can go. Like I took 3 classes at Marquette my senior year in high school, which helped.
Oh
And
yeah, you do have
yeah,
a little bit of that. Yeah.
you do that kind of thing. But I think part of the problem is that education itself has just become like a check the box.
Yeah.
Most college kids today come out, they graduate and aren't really well equipped for the workforce, because college really
Yeah.
isn't about equipping you for the workforce or equipping you to lead a better life. It's just like, hey, come here because you need this degree and go through the motions while you're here. You'll have these letters behind your name and then you'll be qualified for the job you want. The letters don't qualify you to do anything.
Right.
And like people are like, well, what about MDs, doctors? Having MD behind your name means that you've been trained to do specific things. It doesn't mean you're good at those things. There are shitty ass doctors out there. You know what I mean? And it's so it's like the education itself is meaningless in and of itself.
Okay. Yeah.
And I love education.
Yeah, you got how many? You got 3 degrees already. You're working on the 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a lot to chew on. Are there any good books you'd recommend?
What's the book? There's a book that's very popular. You may have read it. I have not read it. It might be called Education or something. I don't know. Bill Gates was a big fan of it. Let me see if I can
Is it
find.
like Creating Innovators or something? Is it Tony Wagner?
Mm-mm. Let me see if I can find this book. I can't. If I think of it later, I'll.
Factfulness. I have that one.
Educated. Educate. I haven't read this book, but everyone talks about it. It's called Educated.
Oh, is it?
By
Isn't
Tara.
it a memoir?
It is a memoir, yes, by Tara Westover.
Okay.
Yes, memoir.
I started reading that, and then I had to give it back to the library because there was such a huge request behind me.
Yeah,
there's
see?
like 749 people behind me.
I'm telling you, this book is really popular, and I hate memoir. I just can't read memoirs, so I've never gotten into it. But someone out there, please read it and let me know what it's about and what you think of it. But I don't know. I'm kind of a classicist, right? Like I believe in the classical version of education. It's like I picture Plato or Aristotle like walking around like peripedantically with like 10 students like behind them as they observe things about the world. So I'm really old school in my education. That would be my dream job, just like walking around like calling out observations on the world as like 10 select students follow me around.
It sounds like the way I live my life, minus the 10 students. It's just me randomly. I use a cane as I'm walking down the street, and I'm like, yes, that. Oh, wow. Look at the facade of that building. Wow. That really tells you something about the mid 20th century.
Well, that's why I like that's why I like antiquing. Because when you go antiquing, it's like an intellectual game. You can like try to discern and observe and identify things about the objects in an antique store, and it really tests like your knowledge of culture and history.
Oh, it really does. I towards the end of last year, 2019, I started going to estate sales, and that was like my favorite thing to do. Found some awesome stuff there. And they're like, oh, this person has a lot of taste. I don't know. This person.
Or you find something that's like actually expensive or like worth a lot, and they've underpriced it because they don't know what it is. Like I always like finding. I only can do it with books, but I'm sure other people out there can do it with other things. Where you find like a knickknack and you're like, it's at a garage sale for $1 and it's worth like 10 grand.
I found this. I have right over here. I got this like second print of In Cold Blood by Truman Capote.
Oh yeah, nice.
For $2.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Did you look it up? How much could you sell that for? It's more than $2. Wait, is that a second edition you said? Too bad it's not a first. That'd be valuable.
Yeah. And then I got like I think it was like a 6th printing of Catcher in the Rye for $2. I gave that as a gift actually to someone that I know who collects Catcher in the Rye books.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's a whole like secondary market for Salinger out there.
Yeah, that's a popular book.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Actually, the first editions of those are very coveted.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Um, the but yeah, so education is tough. It's one of those things where I think your approach is the best. Be an autodidact, teach yourself whatever you want. But in order for people to do that, they have to learn how to learn first, and that's what I think we need to focus on in like especially early education is teaching kids how to teach themselves, right? It's the whole fish
Yeah.
give a man a fish thing. So that's where we need to focus our attention. The same thing in college. College, we can't just like shove knowledge down people's throats. We need to kind of teach them how to think as professionals in the
Yeah.
workforce, right? Or out there in the world, how do you think and act and adapt and add value to society and to the economy? And a very small part of that is knowledge, right? Most of it
Yeah.
is not related to content at all,
Mhm.
and we don't teach that those other skills enough. And some of those are soft skills, but some of those are also yeah, people call them soft skills, and I don't like that term because they have hard outcomes.
Oh,
Uh, if
yeah.
it's like if you
Or they're
can,
not as equal.
yeah,
Like you say soft, it's like, oh, something you don't need to spend a lot of
right,
time
yeah,
developing.
exactly.
Yeah.
If you botch every job interview because what's like kind of an extreme scenario, you end every sentence by like saying something lewd, right, or whatever, right? This
Yeah.
is not a good example, but and then you can't get a job. Well, that's a hard outcome.
A lot of stuff you have to do in life is collaborative in nature, and you need to be able to work with other people, understand where they're coming from, and what their personalities are like, and how you can best reach them, what their strengths are, and applying them and putting them in position where they can provide the most value to whatever you're working on. It's there's knowledge, and then there's everything else too.
Yeah, exactly. So, and like, there's so much to learn, right? Like when you get into like, some people like the stuff we've been talking about, like computing and those sorts of things. And, it's like, and there's history to all this stuff too. Like, going from vacuum tube computers to transistors to integrated circuits, which, are circuits with, kind of many transistors and there's history to everything. Um, and but there's so many fields, it's like whether
Yeah.
it's culinary
So
science. I mean, that's a whole, it's just like,
so
and
then you have
people,
to go into whatever you're most curious about and interested
yeah,
in, right?
that's right. Because I mean, people are like, well, I like cooking. Well, yeah, but there's also like a lot of rich knowledge to cooking, right?
Yeah.
Like food science and ingredients and agriculture, right? And
Right.
and supply chain and the economics of food. The history of food. Food is culture. So anything, any subject just has a host of different things you can master about it that make it really exciting. So
So focus on learning how to learn.
learning how to learn, that's the bottom line. And if you know how to learn, you will be adaptable and flexible and anti-fragile and really and at peace with yourself. You'll be a unified self that can find fulfillment. Look, there's a lot of people right now that are having a problem kind of finding meaning in these times of isolation.
Yeah.
But the person who knows how to learn is also through that process undoubtedly cultivated an interior sense of self, right?
Mhm.
Where they can be at peace with just being with themselves in their own heads,
Yeah.
and find fulfillment there. That's not to say they don't find fulfillment socially, right? But that those types of skills right now, I mean, or that type of state of being right now certainly comes in handy.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I don't know what we talked about, but it was a good time.
Blacked out. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you later. Thanks for listening to Rich Conversations. Again, you can follow Remington at Remington Tonar. Have an inspiring day filled with learning and joy.